We're so pleased today to have with us Molly Castelloe, the director of Blind Trust, and also the protagonist of the movie, Dr. Vamik Volkan. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us. We also have two very special guests as well. We have Noah Ovadia, who will co-host the session with me, and we have Jennifer Batten as a guest discussant. So I'm just going to tell you a little more about each of them. Molly has a doctorate in performance studies at New York University in theater and psychology. And she has extensively written about psychoanalysis. Her movie Blind Trust was granted the Gradiva Award by the National Association for the Advancement of Psychoanalysis in the US. And Dr. Volkan, who's joining us from Cyprus right now, where he was born and raised, I believe. He is a renowned psychoanalyst. He founded the Center for the Study of Mind and Human Interaction at the University of Virginia School of Medicine in 1987. Over the next 4 decades, he and his team traveled around the globe, bringing enemy groups together for dialogue. He has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 5 times, I believe, or maybe even more than that. His publications include large group psychology, racism, who are we now, societal divisions, and narcissistic leaders. I believe that's the most recent one, Dr. Volkan, 2020. And another one, Killing in the Name of Identity, a study of bloody conflicts. But I did see he has written over 40 books, which is really impressive. And we also have our co-host, Noah Ovadia. She is the co-chair of the Citizenship and Democratic Education Special Interest Group of the Comparative International Education Society, which, as you know, sponsors our festival. She is a former civics teacher and a current PhD student at Teachers College, Columbia University. She researches the teaching of controversial issues, the civic identity formation of transnational youth, and the theory and practice of civic listening. So quite on topic for the themes in this movie. And Jennifer Batten, our guest discussant. She is the current co-chair of the Peace Education Working Group for the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict and the network coordinator for the Ohio Peace and Conflict Studies Network. She is also the former director of education for the state government office in Ohio, serving all of Ohio's schools, colleges, and universities. And she also heard Dr. Volkan speak in person a long time ago in Ohio. She knows his work from years ago. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Adriana Cepeda. I'm the co-director and co-curator of the Film Festivalette. I'm also a filmmaker, a psychologist, and I worked in citizenship and democratic education, peace education for a few years in Colombia and abroad. As part of that work, I was able to go to Cyprus with Jennifer and Jorge, who's also connected, the other co-curator. So I feel a closeness to you, Volkan, at a personal
Yes.
level. Also, you come to
Nice.
Colombia, which is where I'm from. So we know each other's contexts where we
Yes.
raised. But so we're really so pleased that you were able to join us. Thank you so much. We love the movie. We're so moved by it and really inspired by it. And then at this time in the world, it really seems so important to talk about these issues and how they affect education. So we wanted to start by asking both of you, Molly and Vamik, how this movie came about. How were you able to come together, find each other, and work together? I know, Molly, you're from the south of the U.S. I understand this movie took 9 years to make. Is that correct?
I think it was 10.
Yes.
I completely understand.
Well, I discovered Volkan's work through reading his book Bloodlines about ethnic pride and ethnic terrorism and identity. And I was so fascinated. In that book, there is a chapter that was the basis for the scene that's really the climactic scene in the film with the Milosevic rally at Kosovo. And I reached out to him after reading that, and he was so generous in his work. I was fascinated. I went down to, I think, the last conference at in Virginia of his institute, but that was so many years ago. And then I wanted to pursue learning more about it, probably connected to my coming from the southern part of this country, where Dr. Volkan also worked, in North Carolina, where I'm from, and in Virginia, as you know, where he lives most of the year. And then I did the interviews, really. The film came out of the interviews that I did while he was the senior Erik Erikson Scholar at the Austin Riggs Institute in Massachusetts. Jerry, who has a scene in the film, was the director of the institute at the time. And I also, Adriana, thought these ideas are fascinating and so timely and relevant. And so I wanted to be able to share them with others. I was moved by them also, by his main ideas of large group identity, chosen trauma, the importance of collective mourning, time collapse. So I just put the film together through these interviews and the intercuts of some archival footage. And I'm really honored to be here with you today.
Thank you, Molly. And Vamik, what was the experience like for you to all of a
Well,
sudden
I
protagonist
felt like I
movie?
was a movie star. uh, well, it's, really, Molly is a wonderful movie maker. And, she makes one version of it, and then she improves it again and again. It's wonderful to get to know her. So I was very pleased that I met her, and I tried to explain some concepts and refer to some of my experiences and uh, illustrate that as a psychoanalyst, we can also observe psychological processes that belong to large groups of thousands, millions of people who share same entity. And just briefly, Sigmund Freud very seldom talked about identity. Some people said he mentioned it 7 times. Other people say he mentioned it 9 times. But he did mention it and talked about his being even he was not a nationalistic person. He was a Jewish person living in Austria, and he also, when he was talking about when he was 4 months before I was born in 1932, Albert Einstein wrote to Sigmund Freud and asked questions about why people make wars. You know about why war occurred. And when I was becoming an analyst, of course, I read it. And suddenly I realized that Freud had prejudices. He was saying that some large groups, and he mentioned 2. One were Turks and the other were Mongols. They were like devil. I was like a devil. And I almost decided not to become a psychoanalyst. But I did. But poor soul didn't know that very soon Nazis came. So the German became devil. We're all same. I've been working all in many, many, many different countries. Human beings are same everywhere. We are all same. And under certain conditions, we do all kind of horrible things. Under other conditions, we do wonderful things. So I shared this thing with Molly, and she made this wonderful movie. So really, it's her show, her creativity.
I had a great subject.
It must
Yeah,
have been so
okay.
challenging. It must have been so
Okay.
challenging to try to figure out what to include and what you decided to leave out, because he has such an extensive body of work, and I was looking through
Yeah,
one of his books, and it's just
yeah,
fascinating. So many
yeah,
different
yeah,
possibilities.
yeah.
Can you tell us more about that, Molly? Because it seems daunting. But
It was finding the narrative and sort of a cohesive sequence of events. Also relating Vamik's ideas to his personal experience, which I think is so unique about his theories, how they're intimately entwined with, these points in his life. But it came down to the main ideas that I could convey in about an hour, starting with large group identity. So I sort of put it together through his ideas and then trying to integrate his ideas, his main ideas, with his personal experiences. But you're right, it's just a fraction of what he's written and done and thought.
so let's see the trailer. Jorge, can you show us a small segment of the results of their efforts?
Can everyone see the screen?
Yes,
Yes?
I do.
Yeah, we can see.
Come on.
Reading.
It's reading. Yeah. All right, maybe we'll come back to that in a second. I'll see if I can get it to work.
It's a big file.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I will want to, one parenthesis, since I do want to tell people that have joined that there will be an opportunity for questions at the end. So please, if you'd like to ask something, think about what you would want to say. And okay, so since the trailer is loading, I have another question for you all, for Molly and for Vamik. Because the festival takes part as part of in the context of the Comparative International Education Society, and most of the people that watch the movies are educators. It's very interesting for us to try to link what Dr. Volkan's work, what's featured in the movie, but also what's not featured in the movie, with the education field. And to start us off with that, I wanted to ask you more about what you say in the movie, Dr. Volkan, about how important it was to understand the context that you would work in around the world, and that going to elementary schools, talking to the children became really important, that somehow the culture, everything that had happened was, that's what I understood, was already kind of in these small children. You could kind of understand it through them. Is that correct? Can you tell us more about
Yes,
that experience?
yes. We developed a methodology that we call the tree model. And the goal of the tree is to get to know the psychology of the large group that we were going to study or bring to a meeting room with opposing large group. And so, like a physician, you make diagnosis when a patient comes to see you. You get to know about his or her childhood and former problems, traumas, and was it good mother, was there a bad mother, etc. Same kind of thing we did in a country for many months. For example, the movie shows my talking to the kids in elementary school in Estonia. After the Soviet Union collapsed, Estonians lived under others so long, and 1/3 of the population in Estonia were Russians or Russian speakers. So they're very anxious that they would lose their independence. And so we talked to foreign ministers, we talked to best friend of the president, we talked to rectors of universities, but sometimes you got the best information from taxi drivers and from children, because children would tell us their mothers and fathers' anxieties and so on. So my team would spend a lot of time to get some idea about what kind of psychological anxieties develop in a country. For example, after they gained the independence, should be happy, but they were so anxious because of their history that they would be reconquered, or 1/3 of the people in Estonia would dominate them, or on the other hand, Russians who lived in Estonia were anxious because they did not know Estonians, and when the school opened, they didn't know how their children would do in school and so on. So you get all these things, you get prepared before you get so-called opposing groups, representatives of opposing groups start talking and finding solutions for themselves. We never advise them do this or that, but we had to know about the situation so that we could direct them to find solutions for their problems.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very powerful segment in the movie. I was very moved by how just something simple like teaching a language can transform a community, right? Involving the other group. That's the that used to be the oppressed, right? Making them just through the learning of the language, giving them another status, transforms the community. So I think Jorge's saying that he's ready to show the trailer. Let's see if it works now.
Can you see?
Human beings live in groups, large groups, ethnic groups, national groups, political groups, and so on. Large group means a group of people who share certain sentiments, culture, food, dances, nursery rhymes, and history. After trauma, the original sufferers suffer, but then next generations continue the effects of this trauma, sometime for generations to come.
Vamik has written that if diplomacy is like a basketball game, then the historical traumas of a people are like 1,000 bottles of olive oil poured on the court.
This is a very personal history. I'm sure he's told you about it. But as a Turkish Cypriot, growing up in an area that was war-torn and riven with strife between Turks and Greeks, he took it upon himself very early on to see what can be learned about these conflicts through looking at them through a psychoanalytic lens.
When I got into international relations, I suddenly realized that identity is the key concept in international relations. You see that society develops an entitlement ideology. One day, I will get what I lost back.
Thank you, Jorge. Wonderful. wonderful to see a segment of the work that was done. It's really quite wonderful. So Noah, I'd like to bring you on now. Are you there?
Thank you so much. And I want to, add on to everyone's praises for this film. I think it, shares Dr. Volkan's work so beautifully and is also so relevant exactly in this moment in time. I wanted to ask a couple of questions. I want to first to you, Molly, and thank you for your direction. I wanted to ask about some of your choices in the way that you spliced kind of historical and contemporary images, and you evoke these really crucial historical time periods, peoples from all around the world, leaders who kind of connote both a more negative or more positive type of leadership. How did you choose what to include, and how to kind of complement the interviews and Dr. Volkan's work?
Well, that was a big challenge, and it meant, I mean, it's part of what took so much time, is just sifting through a lot of archival footage and also some stock footage. I felt strongly that I didn't want it to feel like a talking heads film. And, it shouldn't. I don't think it would have represented the ideas and where they came from more truthfully. So it was a lot of research. How did I decide? I mean, just like Vamik said, by going over it again and again, like editing a book or a paper. I guess as much as possible, I tried to refer to the events that he referenced. But then I agree with you. It was so relevant to today. The impulse was to try and make it applicable to the world we live in today and the times of today. I think these ideas should be better known. We all of us would be better being familiar with these ideas and these dynamics, these unconscious dynamics of large groups that he talks about, and his main concept of large group identity. I don't know if that answers your question sufficiently, but they're my first thoughts.
No, absolutely. I thought it was so relevant because when you look at the way that this is, like Dr. Volkan is saying, such a global phenomenon, and there's kind of analogies to be found, it somehow makes it maybe less personal for someone who might be from a region of the world that is experiencing something that feels so explosive, almost unique kind of, and really just making these historical and contemporary and global analogy, I thought was a really powerful choice. So thank you. And I wanted to also ask you, Dr. Volkan, a question. A lot of the film deals with societies who are kind of reliving these chosen traumas. But I also wanted to ask you about societies who might be experiencing kind of a fresh trauma for an existing and ongoing conflict. How can a society move towards choosing that path of mourning and healing, rather than that choice to go to the sense of what you call reactive power, in that moment when maybe trauma is so fresh? And I think because, as Adriana was saying, what's the role of education in that? So how can schools and the education field more broadly engage?
They use different things, and also you have to consider the political leader followers relationship, political leaders personality organization, or some again political societal processes that they focus on old traumas and connect them with the new ones, all kind of things. I mean, like right now, there are two wars going on, Ukraine and Russia, and the other one, Israel and Gaza. And we see the usual thing, human beings, sorry, for example, I had a chance to study, get to know Putin's life and what is happening in Russia. And I wrote a couple of papers illustrating how those things played a role in, this unexpected war, for example, just going on. So in Russia, for example, 1940, the Nazi invasion is like they made it as if it is happening right now. When the smallest children who go to kindergarten, the first thing they teach there is 1940s. And uniforms are now, they're military wearing 1940s uniforms. So you call them, the past traumas. Some of them centuries ago, they get reactivated. Some of them are traumas that are rather recent and but still not mourned. So there are so many factors that we have to look at them. You have any specific question?
Yeah, so maybe a question of how, if you could maybe expand more on the tree model that you use, going from the roots to the branches,
Yes.
how you implement those through the work that you do.
Well, first of all, you need money. So we were very lucky that once we became known to do this. It was a multidisciplinary. For example, without historian, we wouldn't know this or that. Linguists we had, and so on. And also, I am very grateful to former President Jimmy Carter. Right? I met him after he was president. And for example, when we worked 7 years in the Baltic republics after the Soviet Union collapsed, Carter Center had received $3 million. And we were able to receive a lot of this money in order to be able to work there. None of us learned one penny. We were all, faculty members, we had our salaries, but the money was for using to do the work.
Wonderful.
And then people got to know this, and they would. We were so grateful. People would call us and provide funds for this. And then you have to go and do a lot of work, find out who may be influential in the society, and who do you choose to have these dialogues with the opposing groups, and so on. And sometimes we would spend almost a year doing diagnosis.
Yeah. So I guess that connects really to the question of maybe the timeline of how close to a time of a fresh trauma can this work of dialogue take place? Can a group who's mourning make space or hold space for understanding the other side, so-called, of a conflict?
Well, again, everything depends. If you have connections and so on. For example, the way we started was after Anwar Sadat went to Jerusalem in 1977. 1974, there was again a war between Arabs and Israelis. And in fact, Sadat had started it. It was in 1977, he went to Jerusalem. And he gave a talk at the Knesset and said that 70% of the problems between Arabs and Israelis is psychological, local psychological war. And so from the very beginning, because governments were involved, the Committee of Psychiatry and Foreign Affairs of American Psychiatric Association was able to bring together very high-level representatives the very beginning. And myself and another person who is a Greek American, we were the junior members. And we were guinea pigs. They wanted to watch us. And 3 years later, we became the leader of this group. And then we were able to bring very, very important Arabs and Israelis before Oslo talks. And like psychoanalysts, we never publicize it. You don't see this in televisions or history books or so on. But 6 years, we prepared Arabs and Israelis to be able to talk in Oslo. Yeah.
Incredible work.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Jen, I think you also wanted to intervene right now.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Volkan and Molly, for this film. I can see many uses that we can use not only in higher education, but also in secondary education for discussions,
Yeah.
history and peace and conflict studies, of course.
Yes.
One of my questions, so Adriana asked me to focus on sort of primary, secondary level, at least one of the questions. So my question is, what role can education play in supporting mourning? You mentioned, Dr. Volkan, about the importance of mourning, while also helping to bridge the divide between people of different identities, but particularly because people like Alexandra, who's on from Serbia, some of my colleagues in the Philippines, and what will happen there in Ukraine and Russia post this conflict is, how do we best prepare the teachers, though, to be able to do that effectively? So what role can educators play in the classroom to help support this mourning that you talk about, and how there are ways to do that well, right? So how can that be done without causing, inciting more conflict?
Are you a teacher? Are you a teacher? Yes. Well, my family, my father was a teacher, my mother was a teacher, my sisters were a teacher, I'm a teacher. I come from a teacher's family. The only one that we deliberately used teachers was in Estonia. As I told you, you had Russian kids who didn't know Estonians and so on. And we were able to develop a program. I wrote about this, never mind the details. We brought teachers and we met with them regularly. One of my colleagues who were part of this program, his name is Maurice Apri, was in charge of this program. It's written. So we worked with teachers, we met with them every time we went to Estonia, and helped them to deal with their own psychology, so to speak, and able to teach the kids, Russian kids, for example, to accept Russian kids in the schools and so on. So teachers are extremely important because besides families, sometimes more important the families in directing kids' minds to more positive ways behaving.
Thank you. I think we're hearing someone else's voice too in the background there, but one more quick question is, here in the United States, many of our states are banning through our state legislators the ability for educators to talk about what they're calling, quote, divisive topics. So I don't know how you teach history at all anywhere in the world without something being considered divisive, but so that's not just in primary and secondary, but also in higher education. So my question is, what impact does it have on mourning and healing when you only have one perspective of the history being taught, of the historical event?
Yeah, you have to get more complete picture of the event, stories of both sides and so on to understand it.
Jen, if I could add something too.
Yes,
From what I've learned of Vamik's work, that one way to approach teaching this is to help kids become familiar with the main idea of large group identity and how it operates within them and their
Yeah.
families.
Yeah.
And also along with that, you know, the history of that large group and the
Yes.
losses of that large group.
Yes.
I know it's tricky with this kind of prohibition, but I don't even think that's taught, you know, the concept of large group identity to kids and how it operates within each of them.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, it seems to me that this awareness and critical thinking also of propaganda, of what certain leaders might be doing, if this is done in the schools, it could maybe even act as a protective fact, like a protection kind of from these terrible developments that some leaders push society towards, right?
Yes, I agree. I think the idea of leader-follower dynamics, right, that Vamik has elaborated is another way to approach teaching kids that there's this dynamic between leaders and their followers, and we can look at it in various case studies.
One more quick question is for Dr. Volkan. Actually, in the film, you mentioned the power of memorials and how well designed, specifically, you mentioned the Vietnam Memorial is. And you talked about the ability to see one's reflection, to see names, the ability for people to touch it. So based on your experience, what are some of the key design elements for those who are creating memorials in countries? Because I see we have quite a few countries that are on today that will help people mourn, but don't incite violence towards the others. And do you have any examples of a memorial where there's collective mourning for both sides in a design?
Nothing comes to my mind right now.
Are there some other design elements that are really helpful to when designing these memorials that help reduce or that help the mourning? Because you mentioned some of the key points, the Vietnam Memorial was so well done.
Yeah, but I cannot remember the details of it right now. There are memorials that, again, in Baltic republics, I visited many memorials and I wrote about one, but I cannot remember the details.
The Tbilisi monument, the hot monument.
Yes, there was, yeah. And it is, also, it is not just the design of it, what teachers say about them, and when you visit stories about them, you see every present trauma induces memories of previous traumas, undigested ones, or way back, my goodness. For example, when we were bringing Estonians and Russians together, when the Russians would get upset, they would start talking about Mongol Tatar invasion, my goodness. Or if you had Greeks and Turks together, I can bet you $1 million. At one time, they're going to talk about the fall of Constantinople. They go back to those kind of things. So the issue is, if you're dealing with schools and so on, you can also separate them. Like today, relationship between Turks and Greeks is different than what happened in 1453 or whatever. Those kind of things can be important for the teachers to know that present traumas bring to mind in society or parents or even some teachers' mind old traumas, and that makes it more difficult to deal with the mourning or issues that are present right now, because they get connected with all kind of other things.
Thank you. Thank you. I know there's more questions, so I don't want to take up the time there. So, Adriana?
Yes, may I also ask something?
Yes, Sehavit, please intervene.
Thank you very much. My name is Professor Zavid Gross. I'm from Israel. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Education at Bar-Ilan University in Israel and the chairholder of a UNESCO Chair for Values Education, Tolerance and Peace. For
Yes.
20 years, I'm facilitator of a conflict resolution course between Palestinian and Jewish students at Bar-Ilan University. I'm also conducting study tours to mixed cities in Israel with Arab Palestinians.
Yes.
With the leadership, and also I initiated a special Bet Midrash, a madrasa. I meet together imams and rabbis to study together the canonical texts from Islam and Judaism, and it works beautiful. And even in this year, which was really a very challenging year because we have a war in Israel,
Yes.
nevertheless, my workshops and all the activities went fantastic at the university, and it was a very important message for the students. And I'm always telling them that they are actually the ambassadors of peace. They are agents of change, which is important. Yet my question is, how, actually in the academia, unfortunately, peace education is a non-issue. And my question is, and by the way, I'm the chair of the Peace Education SIG at the CIES. And my questions to you is, how can we encourage researchers to participate and join Peace Education SIG and see it as a very important thing and a very important value, and how can we encourage them to conduct research in peace education? Because, I think that academia has a very important role. I mean, we need to serve as role models for our students.
Yes. Yes.
For the academic associations, and how come that at the CIES and the ARN, many other academic associations, peace education is a very, very small and tiny group.
Yes.
How can you suggest, how can we enhance this message, and how can we increase the number of participants who are really devoted and committed to this important issue?
We are talking about it. You're talking louder. People like you need to pick up more and more. And I mean, you cannot just go and talk to a leader, do this or that. Because some leaders are so wonderful, some leaders are not. And I mean, I lived in Israel for 5 months. Did you know that?
No.
Oh, I was a guest of Israelis in 2001. Almost 6 months I lived in Israel.
So please again. Come back again.
And come back again. I lived in Israel, and Israel, is just like United States. People came from different parts of the world. I was living next to Israelis that had come from Russia, for example.
Yeah.
So in a sense, also Israelis themselves need to get together and have more, shared identity. There's so many issues in Israel, and there are also friends. We have a organization called IDI, International Dialogue Initiative. You may want to look at it. There are Israelis in it, wonderful people who are also doing something like you're doing. Just look at the International Dialogue Initiative. And unfortunately, one of them, my best friend in Israel, when the October 6th thing happened, his son-in-law was killed. So horrors and good things all constantly continue, and we should not give up. And we should also know that people are the same everywhere, and we respect everybody around the world. And
Yeah, I just want to say as a final comment that I was invited by Bloomsbury to edit a handbook on peace education, and I would like to invite all the participants to send contribution to this important handbook. I believe that through publications we can do a lot, and volunteer to do it, because at faculty I have so many things to do, but I'm so I'm so concerned about what's going on, and I think that books can initiate hope. And we need hope in this world. And those who really believe in this and have all sorts of suggestions and thoughts, a handbook is a great opportunity to enhance these things. So first of all, I would like to invite you also to write for us the preface or whatever. I will be very honored. And all the participants, I will be very happy if I can get the list of the participants. I will write down my email address in the chat, and please contact me and send your contributions. I think that in this very sensitive era, we need to be very responsible. And one of our responsibilities should be to publish, otherwise perish. And I think about it literally. I think that through publications and through meetings, through peace education and many other things, we can really promote ideas, and we can be support group to each other, which is also very important. So
thank you so much. Thank you, Sehavit. Thank you. Yes, please do add your email in the chat, and we'd love to stay in touch. And I'm not seeing any other hands raised, but perhaps people do have questions and they haven't raised their hand. So let's see if other people
want. I have questions to Molly.
I did.
Question for Molly in the chat. Yeah.
And
Yes.
just put one in the chat, but I wanted to see if anybody else from the group would like to participate before we go back to Jen. Okay. So Jen, please do ask your question for Molly.
Oh, sure. Well, I was just Molly spent 10 years on this film and highlighting this important work. And I'm just wondering, what would be your hope? Molly, you did all of this work. What would you like to see happen as a result? How would you like this film to be used in education to make positive change? Molly, you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah, I had a horn going off in the background. Just following up on the last speaker's comments, I think the kind of change that needs to happen, it comes, as Dr. Volkan said, from different directions, right? We mourn there. Ira Brenner has written about mourning in Israel and in Germany. And it comes from many different sources, right? So I think publication is a great idea. But I also think there's art that needs to be shown, that there's policy makers that need to be part of the dialogue, and leadership, civic leaders. So I think we have to think about it sort of as Dr. Volkan did with his own work, working in an interdisciplinary fashion. We have to think about it in different directions. And I'd love for the film to be used for educational purposes more often, for high school, for policymakers and leaders at various levels. I think awareness of these ideas is what's needed to help create change and advancement in our own understanding of human dynamics, right? Volkan, I'm quoting you here, Vamik, but so many things have changed. Technology, we move around in the world in a flash. Boundaries between nations are changing quickly. But we haven't caught up with our understanding of human psychology. It lags behind, and it's the most important.
Okay, terrific. Yes, we have a question from Hugh McLean.
Yes, hello everyone. Dr. Volkan, thank you very much for this film, and Molly, congratulations on it. I know how difficult it can be to make a documentary that is still interesting, when you have interviews and talking heads. But my question, I think, is more about the framing, because it relates to the way we understand, I think, education in society, in more political terms, in terms of particularly the huge trauma we're seeing in the world at the moment, particularly around the Gaza genocide. But my question to you, Dr. Volkan, is your framing is a specifically psychiatric one, which is not surprising given your profession. But I just wondered if there's a deliberate choice to choose a tool or a descriptor like large group identity rather than class or neocolonialism or and a more political analysis that would look at power dynamics in society and between societies, that would open up, for instance, a critique of colonialism or a critique of empire, and I think tie us into some of the more divisive and more vexed, possibly geopolitical debates we're seeing at the moment, because I think that's often where the rub is with people, So it strikes me that in a way to talk about large group identity is almost a non-political way to look at it. It's not if you look at the film, of course, because everything is so profoundly political in big terms. But it does strike me that it's a different kind of device, a different way of understanding it. So I wondered if you see this as an alternative to a more political, power-based analysis of things, or if you think the psychological and the political operate together, if they intersect in ways that reinforce, disturb one another, and what that means actually for our analysis and how things are taught. Thanks very much.
You want me on? Well, thank you very much. I mean, I agree with you. There is a group of psychoanalysts or psychologically oriented people who are members of UN. I gave a talk at UN once upon a time, and everybody was interested, but that was it. And I have a hunch that there's no focus on their suggestions, how to find ways, psychologically informed methods to stop violence. I mean, we haven't come to that kind of real investment in using psychological insights in finding peaceful solutions. We are using it like political, military, economic things, but not psychological things. Serious psychological things. I don't think that they are being used in finding solutions. We have done it unofficially, and other people do it unofficially, but it's. I mean, I live in Virginia. I don't live in Washington or New York. I do not know, but I am pretty sure that they are not really using psychological insight to find solutions.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think it's a very good question, but as I understand it, these ideas around large group identity and chosen trauma, leader-follower dynamics work in conjunction with our understanding of the structural inequities in a society. They don't replace it. But as Vamik has said, often they underlie some of the conflicts and contribute and exacerbate them, these psychological dynamics. So it works with our understanding of the structural in a society, class and race and these other inequities.
Okay, we're running out of time, unfortunately. We may have time for one more question, quick one. If there's anybody who joined us who really wants to participate. Okay. We have another question from Jen Batten. Jen?
Sure, but I don't want to take it up if there's someone else that hasn't had an
No
opportunity.
one's raised their hand yet, so please
Okay.
go.
So, Dr. Volkan, one more last question. From your experience, what can be done early on to prevent mass atrocities when leaders begin to sow the division through their rhetoric and focus on past historical events or the chosen trauma? So, early on, when that begins, is there something that, based on your understanding of psychology, that can be done to help stop it?
I don't know the answer. As I say, very serious psychological insights should be part of like UN or something, that when this kind of things happen, they should go and get advice. And as I say, there are members of psychoanalytic people. There's a group of people, psychologically informed people at UN, but I have no idea if ever they come and ask them to do this or that. Probably they are just going to do their offices and go home.
Yeah, Jen, I would just add that awareness is what can happen. It should be taught so that we can see it early on, right? Because we become aware of the leader-follower dynamics and how history may be being used to incite aggression.
All I do is keep writing, and the one hopeful thing is, for me, the best gift to me is that many young people from many different countries write to me, and they are using ideas for their thesis to get their PhDs and so on. So I hope that some of them stay with it and expand it. So that is the best gift I ever get in my life, is once a month or sometimes twice a month, I hear from young people from all over the world, and that makes my heart feels very nice. And I hope that they will, next generation, they will put psychological insights in preventing or horrible things, or trying to find solutions for horrible things.
Thank you, Dr. Volkan. Actually, you influenced my master's thesis in conflict analysis. I used your transgenerational trauma research in Northern Ireland. So I've been a big fan for over 30 years.
Thank you.
I'm one of those students, so thank you, sir. Thank you.
And I think it's so important that these subjects are cross-discipline. And that was one of the reasons we thought it was really crucial to select this movie for the festival and to bring attention to these subjects for teachers who maybe don't specialize in this at all. Math teacher, science teacher, it doesn't matter. Everybody should be familiar with this subject. And so at all levels, and starting with small children, I think also families. So, we're really so pleased that we were able to show the movie and to have this session with you. Thank you so much. We hope that it contributes to raising awareness about this around the world. Please do share the movie, the people that are connected, and help us contribute to a better world. Thank you so much.